April Fire Engineering's Google Hangout. Our topic for the first Wednesday of the month is always fire training. And today we've got another strong cast of characters. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. But before we start, we want to make sure that we thank our sponsor for this. It's the ISFSI. They've been providing our sponsorship for the Training Google Hangout for quite a long time, since really the inception of it. And they've got a million great things going on that you can reach out to their site about and really take a look at, especially with FDIC coming up, and we'll get into that as we go. Today's topic is going to be how do we address gaps in our training? So before we get into that, I'd like to kick it over to Chief Bobby Halton, because the Chief always has plenty of good stuff to share with us, especially this time of year. So hello, Chief.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. We got a lot to talk about today. We're also going to talk a little bit about some blogging we've been doing the last couple of days and how all that works in the system and you know why we do it and talk about everything from the White Horse Tavern to holes in bomber airplanes. So it's going to be a fun conversation. But FDIC, I think the early bird special has a couple of days left on it. So what's an early bird special, right? It's like if you do your registration now, you save money, which I don't know about you, but at my age and on a fixed income, us senior citizens, we watch every nickel and dime. So early bird is, I think, to the end of the week. So please take advantage of that. If you're a member of a group, right, and you want to do a group deal, you get a discount. So you got 5 people, 10 people, 6 people, 8 people. Check it out. Take advantage of that stuff. It's how we save money. So really important stuff you can do. Military gets a discount. If you're a member of the Society of Fire Service Instructors, you get a discount. Take advantage of that stuff. It's important, and we want to know you're there. So a lot of great stuff going on. There's a brand new event on Saturday night. If you stay the whole week, they're doing a beer garden deal out in the, I think it's, I'll get the town wrong, but go to the webpage, you'll see it. It's going to be cool, live bands, really good stuff. Kind of end the week, you know, Friday night we do the union party, but this will end the week completely. It'll be a blast. So I'm really looking forward to it. Remember, comedy night is on Monday night. You got Tuesday is kind of an open night, or it's Tuesday comedy night. Tuesday's comedy night. Yeah, I'm screwing up. I'm sorry. Tuesday's comedy night. So get your tickets for the Firefighter Cancer Support Network. Stop, Drop, Rock. We got the Fool's Bash on Wednesday night. We're going to have the Hangout, the Unplugged thing this year. We're going to talk a little bit about my friend Chief Pronesti, who we lost this year. But we're also going to start a new deal called John and Bobby and Friends. This year, we're going to be bringing up Billy Goldfeder and Harold Shakespeare. So the president of the IAFF and Billy and John and I are just going to sit and it's unplugged. So it's hysterical and it's insightful, it's honest, and it's authentic. Please join us. And then we go to the Fool's Bash together. So it'll be a great night. Thursday, you've got the 5K Fun Run, Stop, Drop, Rock, and Roll for the NFFF. Got to make that where you can bid on great stuff. You got the block party from MSA, incredible time there, live bands out on the street, absolutely wonderful time. Then you head into Friday. It's the union party. You got the stair climb, please, the national stair climb, please, 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 please. You don't have to wear your gear. You can just climb the stairs in your clothes. If you just want to support the climb, please do that. This is so important. That money goes directly to the, I think the counseling unit of the FDMY. I could be wrong. Please don't quote me on it, but I know that Ron and Victor and Ed have done a great job of making sure that that money goes directly to the people it should go to, associated with 911. And a special shout out to my great friend, young Lieutenant Breeze, who started this whole thing. You couldn't find a better kid in the whole world, and I'm so grateful to him for everything he's done. Grateful to all of you for all you've done, but he's one of those people you never hear about, but he's just the neatest guy in the world, and he does great work behind the scenes. And he's really one of those people you really should know about. And his dad was a great guy too. But his dad's an old fart like me, so don't pay attention to him anymore. So we really want to see it there this year. I'm sorry to ramble on, but FDIC occupies all my working memory this time of year. So it's just always in my head. And it's a really cool time. It really is your show. And everybody is welcome there. It's neutral ground, which we're going to talk about a little bit today when we're talking about gaps in your training. Neutral ground's important, right? If you're just listening to people who agree with you, you're not going to learn much. So we'll talk about that today. We're about 50 some odd days away. Early bird ends the end of this week. Think about your group discounts. Come and hang out, and share and learn and kick around and see a whole bunch of new stuff from all the vendors and manufacturers, and let them know what you think. Oh, emerging technology pavilion that we have at FDIC. There's classes inside the conference by guys like Paul Doherty, who's building cities throughout the world, cities, smart cities. He's building one for 8 million people for the Chinese. You got Colonel Bilch from DARPA, the head of the DARPA robotics program. Coolest guy ever, man. Funny as heck, too. He's going to be speaking there. You got Kurt McKinsey, who's a genius. Tommy Calvert, who's a freaking brilliant firefighter who can tell you all kinds of technological stuff, but really drone programs. He's like the ace on that stuff. You got Sam Kosman coming. This cat walked into a volcano, and he's going to be showing you some of the stuff he's developing for firefighters. So really neat stuff. Can't wait to see you there, and I'll stop babbling.
No need to stop babbling, Chief. It's there's nothing like it, and we'll talk about it as we go. But for those who've never been to FDIC, it is a career changer. I mean, you know, a quick thing for me is I went the first time in either 96 or 97, whenever the first or second year in Indy was, and I've never missed since. And for somebody who started in a very small fire department with really no education outside of central New Jersey, it just changed my entire career. And it's there's no doubt that probably most of my closest friends and confidants, and certainly my mentors, were met at FDIC. So don't miss out. If you have any, come for a couple days, do it.
And it's a different kind of atmosphere. It's a little bit different kind of setup, and we get that. You know, I think that all the training that's going on, when you're talking about gaps, you know, the Brothers in Battle put on great shows in Harrisburg and Portland, and they're important to go to because you get a different feel and a different kind of connotation there. And they're outstanding people, and they do a great job. Kirk Isaacson doing his stuff down in Florida, where he does his gig down there. That's great stuff. You know, you should go to a couple of those every year. You should participate in all the various types of stuff that's out there. Your local state show, whether it's New York State or Connecticut or Massachusetts, I was just there. You should try to get to that too. FDIC is kind of a different. That's where it all comes together from all around the world now, but clearly all around the country. So it's got kind of a little bit different kind of wave to it, which is cool, right? Like you want to go to all the waves you can. You know, for the surfers out there, you know, there's all kinds of different surf. There's all kinds of different snow if you're a skier. There's all kinds of different terrain if you're a skater. So, and it's all important, right? Like, don't just do one thing. Do it all. And all those cats that I mentioned, we dig them all, and hopefully they dig us. And it's not, you know, you don't have to be in one camp and the other. If you're in one camp, you're nuts, because it's the fire service. It's our camp. And there's all kinds of different divisions. That's why in the military, there's the Army, there's the Navy, there's the Marine Corps, there's the Coast Guard, you know, there's the Air Force. And it all matters. So, you know, come and knock yourself out and have a great time and share.
All right. Well, from that point on, we need to introduce our rest of our panel. So if we could, Joe, you want to start off?
Sure. Well, I can't follow you guys. It's a big act to follow, but I'm Joe Pronesti. I'm an assistant chief with the City of Elyria, Ohio Fire Department, Northern Ohio. I do a lot for fire engineering, and Chief Fulton's my idol. But other than that, I will be at FDIC. I'm teaching on Monday morning, and I'm teaching Lost in the Fog of the Fireground, Size Up and Command for the small department. So I'll say this lastly, that I'm up against some steep competition, but the one good thing about FDIC is if you've seen an instructor there, there's other new instructors that you can learn from or might have something to offer to take advantage of. That's the variety is what makes FDIC so great. So I encourage everybody to take advantage of that, and think about my class on Monday morning. If you're with a small department, it'll be worth your time. But looking forward to today's conversation. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Awesome. Chief Shaw, Steve.
Hey there, good afternoon. Steve Shaw, Fort Lauderdale Fire Rescue. I'm the Battalion Chief of Training and Special Operations here. And I'm just really happy to be talking with you guys once again about talking shop and sharing these things regarding training. And I'm very excited to talk about this subject matter today. I'm very excited about the concept of gaps in training. So really looking forward to picking the brain and seeing what comes across Twitter. I'm really looking forward to this.
Awesome. Well, here we go. So, when we were talking about subjects and topics that we could discuss this month, we've got so many to go through, and there's going to be some really good stuff coming up in the near future. But this one came to mind simply because I'm seeing it all over. I was just in Louisiana for 2 weeks, and we trained 8 different departments down there. And our guys that were doing the training had very various levels of fire service pedigree and all solid guys. And one of the conversations we had was, I go to this fire department and they have these really young guys that are really into it and really want to learn but have no experience versus these old guys that have tons of experience and really know what they're doing. How do we bring training to them both? And so the first thing that I brought was, I don't think it's a young versus old. It's an experienced versus less experienced, because I know some young guys in busy departments that have tremendous amounts of experience that might outweigh some of us old timers who work in a smaller job that doesn't see as much action. So it's an experience versus less experience, and I think it's topical. It depends on what we're teaching and how we do it. So my question to you guys is, how do we look at that to start? We put them all through a Proby Academy. Now we bring them into companies. And whether it's a county Proby Academy, a regional one, or our own department's academy, now we assign them to a fire company and an engine or a truck or whatever they may be asked to do. And how do we start addressing the levels that we have, where we have the guy up here with 25 years and he's been doing it forever and he really knows his stuff, but maybe he has bad habits that we don't want the young guy to get? How do we do that? What are some of the options that we can tell the rest of the world that we're using? So that's where I'm at. Whoever would like to jump in, I think that's a good starting place.
Well, I'll say real quick that I think where an instructor fails is where he tries to paint everybody with a broad brush. And I think as you go as an instructor or company officer, let's just say, I think one of the best things that you can find is the ability to judge your crews and their traits, and not to jump in so soon to try to train them all at once. To get to know your people and what makes them tick. I think that's where sometimes instructors will fail. I will say that, for one, I made a grave error at a recent conference that I spoke on, that I always like to pick a younger firefighter. And my goal wasn't to shame them or anything, but to try to get the point across that younger members need more guidance, that they don't have the same amount of knowledge of maybe past instructors like Vinnie Dunn or Francis Brannigan or Manuel Freed or Bill Clark. And I went probably too far, to the point where the kid was maybe embarrassed a little bit. And I learned a valuable lesson that you got to kind of go a little easy on that and build up to those things and get them. That the instructor that yells, "You don't know who Bobby Halton is, you should, you dumb son of a gun," blah, blah, blah. You can't do that. And I think you got to go slow and kind of work your way into those things. And then as that comes, then you say, okay, here's an inch 3/4, here's how you hold it, here's what you want to look for fire conditions, blah, blah, blah. And then that experienced guy, you can have them add into it. But then I think it kind of frees them up to ask you questions and to say, hey, Chief, hey, Joe, what about this? What about that? I personally feel you kind of fill in those kind of gaps. My thought.
Well, you got a lot of experience with it, so your opinion matters, that's for sure. Steve, what do you got?
You're asking this question could probably take us all day to answer, so I'm going to try to drill down to the little parts of it. But we see it. I think that we talk about gaps. We see it everywhere from the probationary firefighters, even before that, when they go to the fire academy, we're seeing the gaps just with what they're coming in with into the academy. Do they have mechanical aptitude? Do they know how to use an iPad more than a hammer and these kind of things? On the job, that's kind of where I'm going to focus. When we first talked about this topic, I thought about a few things right off the bat. And one is like from the technical side, from the training bureau side. When we deliver training here, first of all, we can't assume anything. We can't assume that the 15, 20, or 25-year person knows the content we're about to teach. For example, last week we were doing our first in a series of high-rise training. And our initial thought was, well, they already know how to do this tactic, so let's jump into the 2.5 stuff. But the reality of it is a lot of these guys have not been in an area where there are high rises. So when's the last time they may have fought a high-rise fire? So we can't assume that just because they have time on the job that they've done and seen everything. They may have, and they've probably had some experience, but I can't tailor and I can't assume that for my training that everybody is up here. And I'm not, and please don't misinterpret me saying that I'm trying to teach to the lowest common denominator. I hate that statement. I still think you can teach up here, but you have to start from an understanding that not everybody has the same level of experience, starting there and then building up. So I think about that constantly when we're delivering training. Another thing I've noticed recently, and again, I may be amongst you guys the junior person here, but from the training side, what I've noticed is that, and I don't like to use the word complacency, but when people get assigned to a unit, let's say a medical rescue unit, an ambulance or a rescue truck, they get really good at that job. They really know what they're doing when it comes to EMS treatment and cardiac arrest and protocols and such. And depending on what they've done at the station, depending on what their company officer has decided to do and made clear to them in the beginning, what their expectations are will determine how much else they know. Can that person jump onto an engine and be functional or not? So, and I'm kind of drifting here, but I remember it all goes back to the company officer. Last week, there was a Humpday Hangout on the company officer's role in training, and I thought it was just brilliant. I enjoyed watching that so much because it was so key. But on the same token, before I came into training, I was at a firehouse, N246, the Sistroke Express. And on all 3 shifts, we had some pretty cool, pretty solid guys, pretty solid guys and girls. Me and this guy, Mike Salzano and Danny Moran on all 3 shifts. And we made it very clear from the beginning, we will train every shift. And these are our expectations. And long story short, I remember doing a drill one day into the first, maybe the second year, where we had an acquired structure. And the chief at the time was delivering the training. He goes, all right, Steve, well, this is what I want your crew to do. Your rescue truck is going to perform VES. Now, what VES is, and I'm like, stop right there, Chief. You don't need to go any further. That's the structure. You give them the assignment, they know what to do. And I was so happy to say that because the training had come to fruition. We had trained on so many things, from forcible entry to car fires to structure fires to VES, that when it came time to perform, everybody could function no matter what unit they were on, because we made it clear from the beginning that yes, you're on a medical rescue truck, but we will train together. We will drill together. We are a team. So at least at the station level, we acknowledged that we were going to try to be the best. We were going to try to make sure everybody trained evenly across the board. And I know I'm drifting a little bit here, but when we first talked about that concept of gaps, we can go on all day about this. So those are my first thoughts. We can't assume. People sometimes become complacent on their trucks, and it goes back to the company officer setting that standard at that station.
So when we threw out this topic of gaps, I thought about it a little bit, and I thought that it's interesting. Gaps are kind of local in the process, right? If you think about it, it kind of dovetails right with what Steve was just talking about. If you look at the role of the company officer, one of your most important jobs, whether you're a company officer, battalion chief, assistant chief, deputy chief, senior person, you got to look at your other firefighters and try to help them figure out what skill set they don't have that they might need locally first, right? And it's, in my opinion, it's always local first. In other words, a young firefighter who's working in an area that might have a rural response where they have farm land stuff. For years, we worked with the folks from State Line Farm Training, where they talked about, you know, tractors being overturned and silo fires and grain bin rescue. Well, if you're working in that area, that's a gap that when you get hired on, you're not getting that in the basic Firefighter 1 training program. I mean, you're getting some of it, but you're not getting it to the level that Steve would expect you to have as the training chief in Fort Lauderdale, that he would expect you to have for, say, and I'm just going to throw this, and trust me, all I know about Fort Lauderdale is my sister who owns a broom and flies on it, my sister-in-law who has a broom and flies on it, lives there. But that's all I know about Fort Lauderdale, other than the fact that they've got water there, a lot of water there. So you may want to know how to deal with water-based emergencies in a much more rich and involved way than, say, somebody who lives in Albuquerque, where they don't have water. So you know, that's a different skill set, right? Fort Lauderdale, they have things called alligators or crocodiles that hang out, you know, locally, right? Like New York City's got rats. You may want to know how to deal with those critters because they're kind of intimidating. So that's a gap. If I move there from, you know, currently I'm living in Oklahoma. So if I move there from Oklahoma as a young firefighter, I might not know anything about alligators. You know, I might try to go wrestle one like I'm Crocodile Dundee. It's not going to have a good outcome, right? So there's a gap. There's a real local gap. And it goes to structures too. If you're working in a part of a city that's got a lot of 3-story walk-ups, or it's got a lot of, you know, a standalone commercial, or it's got a lot of high-rise residential, you're going to have gaps in your training where they might want to say, hey, well, wait a second. Here's why we use the freight elevator, or hey, here's what a scissor stairwell is. We've got a bunch of those here, or here's this and here's that. So those gaps are only identified by really knowing your people, and you got to define what a gap is, right? A gap is a piece of training or a skill set or some knowledge that you don't have because it wasn't germane to where you were previously, or it's idiosyncratic or local to where you're working, right? And you know, Joe does his Main Street training, and so there's all kinds of stuff about your Main Street that you got to know, that you're only going to know if that's your Main Street, right? Like there are Main Streets that Joe can tell you about that are built on top of previous Main Streets that are pretty intact. So you might not just have a basement down there, you might have buildings that existed down there before they built the building over it. New York City's classic for that, right? There's a New York City underground that's actually navigable in some places. And you got to know that, right? Because you can't get jammed up otherwise. So when we identify gaps, the people closest to the problem, and this is my rant, I'm so tired of national standards and people thinking that the whole world is Philadelphia, or the whole world is LA, or the whole world is New York, or the whole world is Texas. It ain't. It's you know, it's Bipperville and Bopperville and Kipperville and Copperville, and that's okay. You know, I'm fighting fire in Kipperville and Copperville. I'm not fighting them in Philly and New York and LA. And no disrespect to those great organizations, but they've got their own local stuff, right? So that's why I like local people directing their training locally, because that's where the gaps occur, right? You can create all the standards you want nationally, and they're great, but they're national. Think of food, right? If you live in a certain part of the country, you've got food that's like local food, man, and you folks dig it. And when I come, I eat it politely, but I don't dig it, right? It's a gap for me. I got to learn how to dig it, you know, and that comes with exposure, right? And just because I don't dig it doesn't mean it's not good, right? You know, it's like the old joke from my cousin Vinny. Well, instant grits, ain't no self-respecting Southerner eats instant grits. Hell, no self-respect in anybody eat grits. I'm just kidding. I love grits. I'm just making a joke. But if you're a lifelong resident down there, you can tell the difference between, I don't know, Alabama grits versus Tennessee grits versus, you know, Northern Florida grits. And I'm just making stuff up. So don't hold me to the grit analogy. But that's what we're talking about in training. When we're talking about gaps, we're not talking about gigantic holes. We're talking about the things that make a difference locally. And when the rubber meets the road, it's all local.
I think if I could piggyback on that a little bit is that I agree. There shouldn't be a national standard on this is how you're going to do this tactic or that tactic. And we are getting away from that, I feel, as a service, that when you look online, and this comes into a little bit about the blogging and such, is that I think that an instructor that is worth their salt will take everything in, will teach you what they know and what they experience, but they will never say another tactic does not work or that you can never do a certain tactic. Now, short of expressing the dangers and so on, but that is what I feel is harming. It's taking opinions and creating divisiveness in the service, that you're either on one side or the other, and we're losing that respect of the discourse, that we can discuss things and talk about things. We may not agree. Well, sometimes someone will put a blog up. In this case, we're talking about the blog on ventilation, and great. If your department says you won't do that, fine. Don't do it, but don't say that you can't do it all the way around or it doesn't work, and then try to put it together with some, whether it's modern science or whatever. Totally disagree with that. Yes, I study Main Street, work on Main Street, because guess what? I don't have too much type 2 trusses in my world. It's all ordinary and wood frame. And I don't have too much high rises. So Chief Alton's never going to get a Joe Pronesti high rise class because I don't have them. But, and I also won't say, well, don't do this, don't do that as far as high rises. That's where us as instructors, and this is sponsored by the society, that I think we need to try to be the lead on and to be the role models on, and to try to turn that around, because the blogging and the back and forth it's not a good lesson or a mentoring for young firefighters or young instructors. I went on a halt and rant. I'm sorry.
That's a good halt and rant. I'm having phone issues, so don't mind me jumping all over the place here. But
unmute Aaron.
Yes, sir.
There we go.
Yeah, you got me?
Yep.
You're back.
All right. Yeah, I'm jumping all over. This phone is my computer wasn't working, so I'm doing it by phone. So also, just a reminder, hashtag FE Talk if you'd like to comment and jump in with us. We certainly want anybody else's opinions, and we want to hear it, and we want to discuss it. So going with what Joe said, and we're jumping to the blogger, and we had this discussion, and it's been a pretty hot topic the last 24 hours. I think that there's two things that were just said by Bobby and Joe. The first is that we have to talk about skill sets, and what skill sets are what, and who has what skill sets, and what we're teaching to. My guys are not going to be as good at flat roof work as a guy in the FDNY who is the roof man on a busy truck. It's just simply not going to be their skill set. Yet, one of the things that blogger brought up was that, the FDNY never does peak roof ventilation. Well, they do. They do it from a bucket, or they do it from an aerial. So his comment, when as you said earlier, Joe, the broad brush, it doesn't work. You cannot paint with a broad brush. And Christ, in this case, it wasn't a brush, it was a damn roller. So you just can't do that in our world. You can, I guess, but you're not going to be respected, and you're not going to be listened to. And in my opinion, listen, we all have our opinions, but the both sides of the coin. There's Chevys and Fords for a reason. We don't always have to agree, but we have to find some common ground in our business. That's the society in general. Finding common ground has been brutal in recent times, and the fire service is no different. The one size fits all theory, the one tactic fits all theory, it's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense, and we can't train our people to that. I firmly believe in training our people to what we face where we work or where we volunteer, and to think that an NFPA standard or a whatever guideline that's out there that wants to come out, or that somebody wants to post or print or blog about, that says we must do this at all these. If you see must, always, never, you immediately should start looking deeply into it and going, I don't think so, man. You know, you got your opinion, I got mine. We'll respectfully disagree. But, you know, what works for me in Hamilton Township may not work, you know, in Florida. It may not work at the FDNY. So that's when we start talking about these bloggers and we start talking about things. I know we're off the topic a little bit of the gaps in training, but this one certainly got somewhat emotional over the last 24 hours. And that's my feeling. But the skill set really is the key. My guys ride an engine that's basically a squad. They have to know engine, they have to know truck, and above all, they have to know tech rescue stuff, especially vehicle extrication for what we cover. So I have to bring a guy from the academy in and immediately get him trained up in all those topics, so he's a viable part of my crew. And I think that's where the challenge is raised. The volunteer department I came from, they do the exact same thing. They've got a heavy rescue, a ladder, an engine, and a tender all in one building. Oh, and a brush truck all in one building. And we expect these firefighters to become part of our unit, and we've got to fill all those gaps somehow.
But it does sort of, the blogger does kind of create, not to interrupt, but you brought up a point that does create a gap. It does create a gap when someone blogs or a young mind says, but Chief Pronesti, I read that we never go on roofs. Well, you on the as the instructor or as their commanding officer or whatever, their mentor, has got to be able to say, well, other than, well, that we do it here, kids, shut up. No, to be on the ball, you have to explain the positives and yes, what could happen. But the gaps today, I think, are even more incredible for why, because of social media, because of blogging, because of Twitter. And I'm not saying they're bad. What I'm saying is, if you're a good instructor or want to be a good instructor, you got to know how to fill those gaps created by social media or all the onslaught that a firefighter has as far as doing the job.
Can I weigh in there real quick?
Yep.
Jump in.
So back to the gaps in training we just talked about. And I think this kind of ties both in what you guys are saying here. When I first started in the fire service and I got out of the fire academy, I started in Fort Lauderdale. One of my gaps, let's say, was maybe not knowing what was a better nozzle, a fog nozzle or a smoothbore. And I remember whenever I went to 46 back in the day, every shift, it was very interesting. Every morning, one lieutenant would come in and switch all the nozzles to fog nozzles. The next morning, the other lieutenant would come in, take all of them off, and put smoothbores on. And this cycle continued every third day. And some of my best experiences, again, this is a gap now, was listening when they were together and they were starting to their banter and they're yelling at each other and screaming about their experience and stuff. Me as a new firefighter watching that was this incredible learning opportunity. And it happens up until this day. Transitional attack, the blog we're talking about on the roof right now. So it goes back to what you're saying. This is we're trainers, we're instructors. I'm looking at the blog right now, and what is it? 70 comments, 120 shares. So when we're talking about training, yes, some people are being a little bit more aggressive than they probably should, and they maybe should check themselves. But I gotta tell you, training's being done right here. Training is being done. We're talking about it. We're discussing it. We're discussing tactics versus the UL studies versus experience. Even yesterday, I took this the blog post and I sent it to one of our senior captains on the truck downtown. I go, listen, could you read this and get back to me? Not only did he get back to me with a paragraph about yay big, but he was thankful that I reached out to him. It showed him respect. And so training is taking place. So and when we're talking about gaps, me personally, I love the debates. I do think they get a little hostile and a little bit more venom gets spit than should, but there's training taking place there. And I think that's what I like watching and just digesting as much of it as I possibly can, reaching out to those I trust and love in the fire service and getting their point and perspective on it, combining it with the experience I have in the field, and then I can make my own informed decision. Because from our perspective as trainers, man, the weight of our words is massive. So we have to do our due diligence. So I'm kind of, I don't want to say, I don't know if enjoy is the right word, but I really learn a lot when I'm watching the back and forth. It gives me definitely a viewpoint on their opinions, their experiences, where they're coming from. And if I need to, I'll reach out to that person or somebody else and find out more. So I kind of yes, it does get hostile, and I think that's definitely a negative. But the net result is training is getting done. So I do like the fact that we are still training through all of this.
Well, and that is true. There's no doubt that it is raising the bar. The topics are getting out there. We are talking about some really interesting stuff. Some of it does become divisive, and that's what we have to stay away from, is the divisiveness. Bobby, I know you've got plenty to say about this. I know that you want to jump in with something good. So, Chief.
Well, it's fascinating. I mean, we're talking about gaps, right? We're talking about gaps in training and how to identify gaps in training. So clearly, here's an opportunity to talk about one, right? Vertical ventilation. Vertical ventilation. You have to remember that the absence of something is not evidence of absence, right? It's just it's the black swan theory. It's Nassim Taleb. Just because someone can't replicate something doesn't mean it can't be done. Doesn't mean it's not happening. And so if you take that construct forward, the emphasization, we were talking earlier about the gaps and how important it is to be local, right? And not to try to overlay a gross national construct on what a firefighter should be, because it doesn't work, right? In other words, you can't have the ideal firefighter and expect that person to be really vibrant and dynamic in every single context that there is, because we go from Florida to Portland, we go from Bangor, Maine to El Paso, Texas, and everything in between, right? And there's nuance, which is critical. So, if you take that construct of even vertical ventilation, which is a really important concept, a really important tactic, in my opinion, and I think it's tremendously useful, and it's based on evaluated experience. The modern day control mechanism that's been developed over the last almost 600 years, since the Age of Enlightenment, reductionism and scientific method and best practice, and I get all that, and we should have it. It's worthy and it's good. But the craftsperson, that's the artisan who makes the difference, who makes it work, right? In other words, we're negating that. You can't just send some kid through a 5-week or 8-week or 10-week ventilation program or training academy and cover ventilation for 2 weeks and expect them to really understand how to make it work in a dynamically complex environment that is the American Fire Service. So taking vertical ventilation, we can teach them the basic stuff. Hey, I sent out louver cuts by Larry McCormick, who's one of the most incredible firefighters on the face of the planet in the city of Chicago, one of the most decent men you'll ever meet, ever. And Larry was doing a thing on louver cuts, which is a technique that we use for opening up roads, right? And that's important to know. Larry's putting it out there so that craftsperson firefighter, that young firefighter who took the basic training in the academy and got it, how to use the saw, how to know where the trusses are, how to walk the ridge, right? Got all the basic stuff down. Larry's taken him to another level. Here's how you do the louver cut, kid, right? Then there's the coffin cut. Then there's the box cut. Then there's all the different. Now the person has a cadre of 8 or 5 cuts. You start talking to kids like Timmy Hamilton, I think it's Hamilton, Timmy Anderson. You start talking to him about cuts and saws, and holy mackerel, man. It's like, okay, I can draw stick figures. This guy's Leonardo da Vinci. This guy's Michelangelo with a saw. I mean, off the charts, right? You talk to a kid like a cat like they're all out there okay, Rex Morris. Okay, I know basic forcible entry. Rex Morris has studied at the feet of his dad, Bobby Morris. He is the epitome of forcible entry. You talk to Mark Gregory about man versus machine. Yeah, there's lots of guys that can teach it. Mark Gregory is the epitome of that deal, right? He's a craftsman. He's the ultimate craftsman. Lots of folks can build furniture. I tinker with wood, right? I build little boxes, basically. I got friends who build stuff that will blow you away, right? I tinker on old cars, and I got friends who know what they're doing on old cars, and they help me out to make my old cars look good. But I can't do what they do. I know how to use a grinder and a sander. They know how to make it sing. They know how to, make a curve a curve. They can fit a door so that it's perfect. I can put it back on. So I'm a journeyman, right? They're the epitome. So as we talk about gaps, you're always going to have some, right? We're never going to eliminate all the gaps, but we're going to get you to a level, like a guy like Steve can get you to a level where you're, and this is important in this whole discussion of blogging and being nice and polite. Hemingway once said, "There's nothing noble about feeling superior to your fellow man. The only superiority, true nobility, is being superior to your former self, being better than the guy you were or the gal you were yesterday." And guys like Steve and Aaron and Joe, they can get you to a little bit better than you were yesterday. And maybe it's in Aaron Fields and Hove's movement. Maybe it's Kyle Samsung in learning how to evaluate how to move decisively through a tough environment. Maybe it's PJ Norwood being able to read the flow path a little bit better. Maybe it's Denise Smith, how to protect yourself health-wise a little bit better. Maybe it's so all of those people that I just mentioned, whether they're going to take you that next level, right? Maybe it's a cat like Cody Trustle, who's got the experience of East and West, and he can blend it like in really incredible ways, or Kurt Isaacson, who's just off the charts with the stuff that he pays attention to, or Dennis Laguerre and Hose, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on. Everybody's got that amazing capability. What we don't have is a right to shut anybody else up, whether they got here yesterday or whether they've been here for 20 years, whether we think what they're saying is blasphemy or whether we think they're the Pope. They've got equal right to say what they think and feel. We've got equal rights and privilege to respond. But we don't have to get mean, and we don't have to get ugly, and we don't have to get vitriolic. We should stay professional. We should stay polite. Doesn't mean we can't say, as I did the other day, I completely disagree with virtually every word you wrote. And I still love the guy and wish him nothing but the best. Honest to God. Thomas Jefferson once wrote, "A man's religion or ideology or politics is no reason for me not to be his friend." If you can't tolerate somebody disagreeing with you on vertical ventilation, you're 12. Grow up. Doesn't mean you have to dislike him or want to beat him up or take away his birthday or something. That's nuts. That's nutsville. We're better than that. We're a lot better than that. And that's what makes us firefighters. You want to have that attitude? Be a cop. They get to enforce other people's rules. We get to make our own rules. And I get to make the rules on my fire ground when I'm fighting my fire. You get to make the rules and your fire ground at your fires. Remember that. That's what makes us powerful. That's what makes us effective. That's what makes us a community of brothers and sisters that are committed to saving lives and property, not telling anybody else what to do or telling them that we're better than them because we're floating above the crowd because we read some report or we've been to a lot of fires. I've been to a lot of fires and I've repeated a lot of mistakes and then I've learned. So I'm no better than anybody else. Matter of fact, I ain't half the firefighter that 90% of the people watching this show right now are. Honest to God, I suck compared to most of you people who are doing it day to day. And that doesn't make me a bad person or a good person. It just makes me a person. And what disappointed me most was the people who said we should shut that guy up. No. This country, this incredible experiment was founded on the fact that no matter how hateful someone's conversation is, no matter how offensive or mean you find it, that's the conversation we should celebrate the most. Because somebody's going to find your conversation equally as offensive. The minute you stop conversation, the minute you decide someone shouldn't be heard, you're going down the road of totalitarianism. You might as well get in line with Stalin and Pol Pot and Che Guevara and Castro and this idiot in Venezuela right now and all the other totalitarian, ruthless sons of guns who've killed millions in the name of, you know, whatever. So be careful with that stuff. Man, it doesn't, you don't have to agree. You don't even have to respond. But if you do it politely and respect the fact that that person's probably got a lot of great reasons why they feel that way. Sorry.
It's a good rant. It's a good rant. It's an important rant. I think we probably gave that blog its 15 minutes of fame for sure. But I think that the one thing that all of us agree on, and I like that the most, is that if nothing else, it creates discussion in the firehouse, in the fire service, and it opens up that platform. You know, I've been on here more than once and said, you know, some of the blogging, I just disagree with it. I don't like it. I think some of these people make themselves on paper really well and don't do very well at fires. And with that blog, I ended my conversation with him very clearly. Listen, I wish you nothing but the best. I also am really pleased that you'll never command a fire in which I'm on. And that's okay. If his men are and women are pleased with the way he runs his fires and his citizens accept that this is the tactics they will use at their fires and these are the results that they will accomplish, God bless them. But it ain't happening in my town, and at least not on my watch, as long as I'm there. So, you know,
that's why they make chocolate and vanilla.
It is. There's no question. So as we get back to it a little bit, you know, we talk about, I want to jump back into the gap here for the next 10 minutes or so that we've got left. And here's a good example. I was just, right before I came on here, a friend of mine texted me who's a lieutenant in a major Northeast Metropolitan Department, you know, probably over 2,000 or 3,000 firefighters there. They're going to make a switch in nozzles. A big switch going from the fog nozzles to smooth bores on their crosslays. That creates a huge gap. They haven't done that. A big traditional city that has always run, you know, whatever it may be, an adjustable or variable gallonage or whatever they were running at the time. Now comes the time that you have to take every guy who's going to be on an engine and retrain that firefighter to understand the difference in nozzle pressure, the difference in nozzle reaction, you know, all the details that the greats have taught us about, the stuff that, as you said, Ray McCormick and Kurt Isaacson and Steve Robertson and Dennis Laguerre are really putting out there, and so many, and of course Aaron Fields are putting out there in so many great ways. Now you have a huge gap that you have to retrain a fire department for the most part. Those are the kind of things that I think we have to look at how we do that.
And I would say that you want to create a gap, put one nozzle on the trucks. Really? Seriously?
Yeah.
Seriously? There are like a dozen kinds of nozzles. Put them all on there. And the guy that likes this, use that one. The dumbest thing you can do is try to get look at us. None of us are wearing the same thing. I think we should all wear blue shirts with pink buttons and yellow ribbons on the collar every day. Nuts.
So when it happens, how do we get back to getting everybody competent in that area? Joe, what do you say?
Well, okay, let's just take your nozzles. The best thing you could do is to bring in I think the worst thing would be to train you on these nozzles, and that's it. And they'll say, well, why? Well, because we read this study or that study or whatever. Or I think you need to bring in some subject experts on that and to train them like an Aaron Fields or somebody. So when you have a gap like that, or you're going to create a gap, I think that's when you really have to bring somebody in that knows an outside person to train.
There's a much more cost-effective way. Have them sign up right now for Aaron Fields Nozzle Forward at FDIC.
There you go. There you go.
Absolutely. There you go.
Spaces are limited. Sign up today.
There is always an option. Although Aaron Fields' nozzle forward is probably damn near full at this point, isn't it?
Close, yeah.
Close, yeah. So commercial fireground operations, just in case Aaron's is full. Just saying.
I don't think there's anybody in that one. I'm just teasing.
No, I need to fill that bug. But yeah, no, that's exactly it. Steve, I'm sure you've experienced this sort of thing as big a department as you have down there.
Yes, sir. And tying this back into the gaps in general, I think that as we approached what to do with a gap, I think, well, first we have to realize that the amount of gaps we have now is only going to get bigger. So if you don't fix that gap, it's going to linger. So I'm trying to think of some good examples here. Oh, okay. Like high rise is big in our area right now, and I mentioned it before. So the question is, what do we do with it? Well, how do we tackle it? And several departments in our area have taken some different steps. Some have, for example, totally eliminated all 1 3/4 and do nothing but 2.5 inch hose. So there's no variable. That is your choice. Other departments have R&D'd 2 inch hose, and they've taken both 1 3/4 and 2.5 inch and just gone to 2 inch with either 1.5 inch or 2.5 inch couplings. But there was a gap, and they handled the gap. So I think that you definitely, and it was kind of alluded on before, have to recognize it, have to officially, voice it and figure out what the plan is to do from this point on going forward, wherever that gap is. Institute something, train on it, make it the norm, and then move on, because if you don't, it's going to linger, and there's more gaps coming along the way. You mentioned the nozzles before, fog versus smooth. I know some departments, the same thing with the high rise. Some only have certain ones, some have others. We have the choice, for example. The officer's given the choice. You have a fog nozzle or a smooth bore nozzle on your pre-connects. The officer's choice on what to pull. So one, it empowers the officer, and two, it generates that discussion like we talked about before. But that is our gap to that. We handle this gap by putting both nozzles on the truck and training both people on both those nozzles. So that's just my thoughts on that, is making sure you recognize them, making sure you try to put some sort of training or plan in place to address that gap and go forward with it, so you can get ready for the next gap that's coming its way.
It's clearly there will be the next gap. That's for sure. It's funny because I was going through all the posts and all the tweets about the vertical ventilation thing. And here in Ocean County, New Jersey, a couple of guys started a Facebook page just for Ocean County firefighters, or maybe New Jersey firefighters, whatever it is. And it doesn't get much use. And a friend of mine put up there, hey, I haven't seen any action on this page, so I'm throwing it out there. Smooth bore versus fog. Tell me why. And I went, I just don't have any more energy for this today. After all the other, I'm not even going to jump into this fray. I'll let you guys do it, and I'll be entertained when I'm sitting on a plane somewhere and I have free time to read. But these are the good things that I really do like. It's painful to say sometimes, but as I said in my reply to the bloggers post, I love these things and I hate these things, because I like that my guys are reading. I like that I'm engaged and I can learn from so many other people.
Aaron, the problem is, and you're a craftsman, Joe's a craftsman, Steve's a craftsman. You're all artisans of what we do. You use fog nozzles and smoothbore nozzles. You go to the roof and you don't go to the roof. You hit it from the outside and you don't hit it from the outside. You know what I mean? That these folks who think it's always and never, man, it's that simple, and it never will be. And that's what gaps are about. It's being able to identify, hey, when do we pull the fog? When do we pull the smoothbore? When do we pull the vindicator? When do we pull the foam nozzle? That's the artisan. Nobody. I hang out with mechanics. Nobody walks in with one set of wrenches. I mean, these guys got crates full of tools. So it's and you got to be. The gap is how to be at least proficient, I guess is the word you use, Steve, right? Proficient with all the tools, and then build on that proficiency more and more and more. Because if it's the old line, if everything's a nail, or if all you got's a hammer, then everything's a nail, right? Those are terrible. That's a terrible idea.
if I could ask Chief Halton one quick question before we go, and this is not in any kind of reference to your experience. Years ago, when let's say there was a battle or something that you saw early in your career, Chief, let's just say Scott, SCBAs. Did it all the banter back and forth, or pick something in your early career that had people on against each other? Did it adversely affect things like it does now, or the battles that you see now? Did they take place then? Again, I don't mean to disrespect your age. My dad was on the job, but in his time, he never wore a mask. And even when I came on, he would yell at me about wearing a mask. So I just use that as an example. But I guess my point is, you see those battles then today are causing problems like they do today.
Okay, well, just like I told your dad when I had him in probie school, I had to go there. I know. So here's the deal. It's okay. The human condition hasn't changed, right? Folks are the same, and we just hear about it more because we can communicate a lot quicker with the electronic medium. Duh. So we hear it, but no, that it's always been the same, and arguments get heated, and people say things in the moment. The guys and gals who really went places were the guys and gals who'd go back a half hour later and say, "Hey, man, I got a little hot under the collar there. I apologize. I didn't mean to call you a freaking idiot." Okay, I'm good. Yeah, I totally get it. No offense taken. And because that's going to happen, and it's okay. We're passionate people. We're emotional people. The other thing to remember is that passion is what happens first, right? If you read Daniel Kahneman, he calls it System 1. Gary Klein, it's the recognition prime decision making, or naturalistic decision making, and that's where it comes from, the emotional center, the amygdala. Not to go all wonky on you here, but it's just how it works. If you understand how you work, you can understand how to deal with it, right? So the emotional response is always first, even on the fire ground. That's why, I'm not in favor of the first due assuming command. I think it's dysfunctional. I think they should just size it up and let the chief stay in command. And I say that all over the place, and people think it's blasphemy, but Chief Pronesti once told me, if we've been doing something for 20 years, perhaps it's time to do something different. So, I think it's time to try something different. Anyway, that alone's controversial. We were arguing about smooth versus fog in the 70s. We're arguing about it today. We were arguing about when do you go on air. We're arguing about it today. Everything that's been thought of has been thought of before. Now, does it affect us a little more deeply because we can participate at all kinds of different levels today? There, I think you've got something, Joe. Because nowadays with electronic medium, everybody feels like they're part of the conversation. What's fascinating, and I'm the worst, so please, understand that I'm not floating above the crowd here. I'm absolutely the most thin-skinned, easily insulted, insecure person on the face of the planet. And whenever we're threatened, and I am too, or somebody says they don't like it, hurts. It hurts. Nobody likes that, right? And so when we respond, we have to keep that in mind. We do classes, big classes. I could have 599 guys say they loved it. One guy says he didn't. And I think about that one guy for years, and it bums me out. It hurts me. And so, and I know they didn't mean to be hurtful, but we're sensitive creatures, and we're emotional creatures. And if we can keep that in check, we should. So when you see something and it really hits you emotionally, if you can hold off and then respond after a few minutes when you're a little less emotional, it might be better. Chief B used to tell us, don't ever do anything that feels good when you're mad, right? Because it's generally not a thing you're going to be very proud of down the line. And we've all done it. And I'm not putting myself above anybody else. I love books, so I can offer you a great book that's easy to read. You can read it in a couple of hours, maybe an hour. It's called Leadership and the Art of Self-Deception. And the only way that you can be insulted is if you let yourself be insulted. Because Mark Carter, the guy we're talking about, he didn't mean to insult anybody. He wasn't trying to hurt anybody's feelings. He was saying what he thought. The only way it's insulting is if we take it that way. So if you don't take it that way and you just argue the merits of the argument about vertical ventilation, then you can have a good discussion. Doesn't mean you're ever going to agree. And tone's important. And some of us are Some of us are less artful, right? Some of us are more blunt. I've got lots of friends from New Jersey. Right? Right? They're different kinds of cats, you know?
There's a reason that I rewrote my and edited and amended my reply to that blog probably 4 or 5 times before I hit send, because that blunt Jersey thing may have been starting and it probably wasn't going to be a good ending.
Right, and most of those words you were using are blocked by our profanity filter. So, and it's a complex problem, right? It's the human condition. It's where we do our work. We're talking about the socio-technical interface, and it's always going to be difficult. Where I have the advantage is I'm old. I'm old, and I've been sick for a long time. Seriously. So it makes me a lot more sensitive to the mean things I say. It makes me a lot more anxious to apologize if I've hurt anybody's feelings. I don't want to do that ever again. I'm not going to live forever, and I know that. A lot of people can't wrap their heads around the fact that this thing has a freaking expiration date on it. This thing your consciousness is inside of, it isn't built to last. It's basically recyclable. Someday you're going to end up as worm food in one form or another, and that's okay. But what you leave behind kind of matters. And I don't think it should be angry, and I don't think it should be mean. And I don't think that there's any reason, as Jefferson said, to dislike anybody because they believe something different than you at all.
Well, and at that point, I think we're running up on time here, and we made some great points. We've been all over the map. We did cover gaps in training, and we covered a whole bunch of things in between, which is what makes, I think, this Hangout one of the more unique ones out there in the web world. And I think we covered it. I really do. And there's certainly more conversation that we can have for hours upon hours, but I think that's where we're at for today. Any final thoughts there, Steve, Joe?
No, I think we covered it.
Chief?
This was a good day.
It's always a good day when we're all together and somebody's actually watching us or maybe archiving it later. So with that, again, I want to thank Penwell and Fire Engineering and thank the ISFSI for providing us this opportunity and this tremendous forum to reach out to so many different firefighters around the world. And
congratulations to Devin Wells, our new president.
Yeah, absolutely. Congratulations. I know Devin was going to try to get on, but wasn't able to. But hopefully next month we can get Devin on, and we'll be talking FDIC next month. I am for sure. And in the meantime, get signed up, look around at some great classes, and have a safe and fun and enjoyable month in between. And go to some fires. So for us, have a great day, and thank you.